Today we mourn the passing of an icon and a pioneer. Rush Limbaugh died this morning at the age of 70. Friends, we have to hold the line.
Hello, everyone. I know that I am most certainly not the Limbaugh that you tuned in to listen to today. I, like you, very much wish Rush was behind this golden microphone right now, welcoming you to another exceptional 3 hours of broadcasting. For over 32 years, Rush has cherished you, his loyal audience, and always look forward to every single show. It is with profound sadness I must share with you directly that our beloved Rush, my wonderful husband, passed away this morning due to complications from lung cancer.
Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. That was Rush's wife, Catherine, announcing the passing of her husband today. Limbaugh announced late last year that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, a disease from which he ultimately succumbed. A Missouri native, Rush got his start in radio 50 years ago as a DJ at a small radio station in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. Back then, he was spinning top 40 hits under the name Bachelor Jeff Christie. A decade later, he dropped the moniker and turned his attention to politics. In 1988, the Rush Limbaugh Show landed national syndication. At its peak, the show was broadcast to as many as 20 million listeners a week, over 600 radio stations across the country. It's hard to overstate the influence Rush had on American politics and the conservative movement. Rush was a leader, a teacher. He was a friend to millions of people for decades across America. The business that I work in, conservative media, the alternative media, giving a voice to the roughly half the country that is right of center, it wouldn't even exist without Rush Limbaugh. He came before Fox News. He came before the internet allowed so many other shows and programs to come to the forefront. He was there at times when he was the only voice people could listen to across America who had the kind of reach that he did to bring the most important issues of the day, not just to people's attention, but also to explain to them ways to think about it, how to approach these topics. He was the greatest radio host that has ever lived. He was the person that created an entire industry. People, myself included, grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh. We wanted to understand the way that he did. We wanted to be a part of the movement that he was the leader of. Rush has been a phenomenon, a force in American politics for longer than many of us right now have been alive. Myself, others here in the control room. It was tough for us today when we found this one out. Rush is so talented. He's so beyond what you would expect one person to be able to do. The way that he could listen to a soundbite, or he could look at a news story that everybody was focused on for the day, and find that one detail, find that one piece of information that unlocked a whole other level of understanding. It was a gift. He used to say it was talent on loan from God, and that was certainly the case. And now he is resting beside God with an incredible legacy behind him. We only have the country that we do in many ways today because of the arguments, because of the ability to connect with millions of conservatives across the country that Rush Limbaugh possessed. He created a pathway for hosts who would come after him. He created a movement that many of us could feel like we were at home in. Even if nobody in your town or in your city agreed with your politics, if you turned on Rush Limbaugh at noon every day, you knew you were going to have a teacher, a friend, and an inspiration. It's a tough moment for us. There's nothing else that's quite like this. Many people are going to be sharing their personal observations, and I can tell you this much. Rush Limbaugh changed my life. It was, without question, the single biggest break in my career in radio now about 8 or 9 years ago. when Rush's team reached out. I'll never forget when I got the phone call. It was from Kit Carson, who's also tragically passed away a few years ago from brain cancer. Kit Carson called me and he said, "Buck, do you want to fill in for Rush Limbaugh on the EIB?" I thought it was a joke. I actually thought, this is the only time this has ever happened in my life. It had never occurred to me that that would happen. And I thought that somebody had put them up to this. There's no way I was going to sit in for the Rush Limbaugh, get to speak to his audience. And it wasn't just one time. I was very blessed to be back about a dozen times filling in for Rush over a number of years. In fact, it's the reason that I got a syndicated radio show. People ask me, how'd you know you wanted to do radio? Because of Rush Limbaugh. How'd you learn how to do talk radio? I started before having really any practice. I just said, put me up at a microphone. It's because I'd listened to Rush for years. He was the giant in this business. He was the man. He was beyond just one person with one show. He taught so many of us, and over so many years as well. He gave us a sense that we might actually have a fighting chance to win the future of this country against an enormous left-wing media machine that was constantly trying to destroy him, to deplatform him, and he just kept on coming. Rush stayed at the microphone till the very end, until he was no longer even physically capable. We know that because he kept showing up after cancer treatment, showing up. You could hear that he was sick, but he was still fighting. He still had more to say. He changed millions of lives across the country. I wouldn't be where I am in this business without Rush Limbaugh, without him giving the nod, saying, hey, there's this young guy, I'm going to give him a shot. Let's give him a shot, see how he does. That's a remarkable thing in this business. A lot of people don't want to help the next generation. A lot of people don't want to build them up, give people a chance. Rush was generous in so many ways. Of course, there's also the stories about him giving $1,000, $5,000 tips at whatever restaurant he happened to be in. He was very generous with those who knew him. He was generous with strangers too. But more than anything else, he shared his gift. He shared his God-given talent with a country that was in desperate need of it. Rush Limbaugh is irreplaceable. And I do have moments now, not only of the sadness of knowing that I won't be able to turn on the radio and hear his voice at noon, I have a sadness for whether or not we're actually going to be able to fight the way we had fought in the past, knowing that we had General Rush at the front. It's just not the same now. I don't know what that's going to mean for us, but I know that he would want us to fight. So maybe that's the best I can offer you right now. When we come back, we'll be joined by First TV contributor Rob Smith to discuss Joe Biden's CNN town hall and more coming up. You never thought COVID-19 could cost you your home, right? Well, it just might. Here's why. Cybercrime's up 75%, and by far the most serious cybercrime you have to worry about when it comes to your home is home title theft. That's right, cyber criminals, foreign and domestic, are now after our homes, and it's easier than you'd think. The title documents to our homes are online now. The thief finds your home's title and forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to him. Then he takes out loans on your home and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. Insurance doesn't cover you, and neither do common identity theft programs. That's why I protect my home with Home Title Lock. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with my home's title, they help shut it down. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim of this crime and don't even know it yet. Then use code RADIO to receive 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. Again, HometitleLock.com, code RADIO.
Over the years, over your career, you've already spent a great deal of time at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, except now you're living there and you're president. It's been 4 weeks. What's it like? How's it different?
I get up in the morning and look at Jill and say, where the hell are we? No.
Funny guy. You got Biden there with some softball questions from Anderson Cooper during a CNN town hall last night as the network avoided asking the president questions about some important things. There were major issues they touched on, but there were some that they really didn't. You got the migrant crisis brewing at the border, jobs lost at the Keystone XL pipeline, Governor Cuomo's nursing home scandal, which just keeps getting worse, and the resignation of Deputy White House Press Secretary T.J. Ducklo, just a few topics that didn't make the cut during the town hall. But when Trump was president, the mainstream corporate media never shied away from asking tough questions, did they? More than just that. So why the change? Well, here to talk to us about this and more, the media's approach, the Biden administration, and so much more, our friend Rob Smith, contributor at The First and host of the podcast, Rob Smith is Problematic. Mr. Rob, good to see you.
Good to see you as always, Buck.
Let's start with, there's so many places we could go with it. First, let's take it with just at the macro view, Rob. 30,000 foot level looking down. It's almost like I get the sense that the journalists like Biden a whole lot more than they did Trump, and that they're not even going to pretend to hide this. What do you think?
Yeah, they're not even pretending to be objective. And look, I think it's very obvious, even in the first couple of weeks of this presidency, that they got their guy, and it is the job of the legacy corporate media to protect Democrats, and the number one Democrat in charge right now, which is Joe Biden, at all costs. Look at this gushing. It's almost as if Anderson Cooper was a little schoolgirl, just, looking at old Joe Biden just like this, batting his eyes and asking him, gee whiz, Joe, what's it like in the White House? We were not getting any of this stuff during the Trump era. They were so aggressive towards Trump all the time that the obviousness of this complete flip really does even blow my mind. But this is so obvious to anybody who is even paying the closest hint of attention as to how this news media is covering this president.
You had a few issues come up where it didn't seem like Biden, to anybody who was really looking to get answers, had very good ones. But here he was, because we've had Jen Psaki tell us that schools have to be open, COVID reopening with schools. Schools have to be open at least one day a week. And yet here's Biden saying, oh, no, that was a problem. Play.
Your administration had set a goal to open the majority of schools in your first 100 days. You're now saying that means those schools may only be open for at least one day a week.
No, that's not true. That's what was reported. That's not true. It was a mistake in the communication.
It is true. Maybe he's saying we've changed it, Rob, but that is what the White House press secretary said. So when he says it's not true, maybe he means that she made a mistake. But I think what really happened is that they tried to pull a fast one of the American people with, yeah, we're reopening schools at least one day a week. And everybody said, you've got to be kidding me, right?
Look, it's just lies, it's obfuscation, it's all of that stuff. And the thing about it is that they know that they will not be challenged by any of the media. And I'm talking about Biden and his administration, Psaki, the whole team, the whole rogues gallery of liars that we got in there right now. They know that they will not be questioned by this press right now. There was an Axios interview that they did with Vice President Kamala Harris, and she outright lied and said that there was no plan in place for vaccinations when they took the White House. That is false. Everybody knows it's false, but yet this reporter did not push back on that at all. And you know what? With a media that is so in love with Joe Biden, with the media that is doing the job that they see themselves as doing, which is basically to protect Democrats and protect Joe Biden, this media, this stuff is just not going to change. They see it as their job to protect Biden. They're going to do it at all costs. And I'm telling you, this is only a little bit of what we're going to be seeing from the next 4 years. It's going to be basically the media may as well be wearing cheerleading outfits with a big old B on the front for Biden.
Also wanted to have you react to something that Biden said here on the issue of touching on race issues. Play clip 2.
A lot of people don't know how to register. Not everybody in the community, in the Hispanic and the African American community, particularly in rural areas that are distant and or inner city districts, know how to get online to determine how to get in line for that COVID vaccination at the Walgreens.
Rob, a lot of minorities don't know how to. You heard what he said. What'd you think of that?
I think that the Democrats think black people are stupid. I've told you this time and time again, Buck. The idea that black Americans and Latinos are too stupid to be able to use a computer to figure out where to get vaccinated or any of that information is frankly outright offensive. And again, I don't want to compare and contrast too much with Trump, but you could imagine the outrage that we would have seen from the news media and from all these different organizations if Trump had made a gaffe like that. Look, Democrats and the left, they think black people are stupid. It is what it is. It's not going to change. It's the same stuff with the voter ID laws. They think blacks are too stupid to get voter IDs. But the thing about this is that this stuff never changes because we are the only ones who call them out on it.
Rob, you mentioned before Biden's comment that there was no vaccine when he came into office. I just think everybody at home should get a chance to see that one.
The biggest thing, though, as you remember, when you and I, I shouldn't say it that way, as you remember, but when you and I talked last, we talked about it's one thing to have the vaccine, which we didn't have when we came into office, but a vaccinator. How do you get the vaccine into someone's arm?
They're all saying, oh, he misspoke. And okay, this isn't a lie that he's actually going to get away with or a mistruth or a mistake or whatever. But I thought it was fascinating because I'm even willing to extend some grace to people. I speak for hours a day. You do too. We do our show. Sometimes you misspeak, whatever. He's not going to get away with saying there was no vaccine. We all know. But he did say it. And what was fascinating to me was the journalists immediately saying, well, this is actually what he said. No, that's not actually, he can correct it, but it's not actually, he didn't say a thing other than the thing that he said, but you had all these blue checks immediately saying, it was doing a Biden translation. Well, he said there was no vaccine. What he meant is some other thing, but there was a vaccine. Okay.
Of course, and look, that's what we're going to keep on seeing. It's like the media is basically the Biden administration's rapid response team. They really should be on the payroll here.
I want to show you before we go. Jim Messina talking about how excited he was to see Biden up there.
Can you just weigh in finally, Jim, on the humility? When he talked at the end of the town hall about, I wake up in the White House and I ask Jill, where are we? And I'm uncomfortable with them putting my suit jacket on and having all this help. What a breath of fresh air.
Boy, it's true, Bobby. I teared up at that.
I bet a lot of them did. A lot of them are getting the vapors, tearing up. They're getting sad about it, Rob.
Yeah, they're probably getting a little thrill up their leg too, like Chris Matthews had for Obama back in the day. So
well, at least we're here to rain on the parade and bring some truth bombs, Rob. Good to see you, my friend. Rob Smith is Problematic is the podcast. Everybody should go check that out. Rob, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, bud. Good to see you.
Millions of Texans remain without power for the third straight day after a deadly windstorm crippled the state's energy infrastructure. We'll talk to the Blaze's Stu Burguiere, who's on the ground in Dallas dealing with all this when we come back. These days, being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in is anything but predictable, and we can all benefit from something reliable right about now. Well, what could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now, 833-600-GOLD. Don't wait for inflation to start ticking up. Don't wait for the economy to have a massive correction. Who knows what's going to happen with this Biden administration? Take action today. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. It's who I get my gold and silver from. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD. One more time, that's 833-600-GOLD.
Sean, this shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Texas is blessed with multiple sources of energy, such as natural gas and oil and nuclear, as well as solar and wind. But you saw from what Trace said, and that is our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid. And that thrust Texas into a situation where it was lacking power in a statewide basis. That was power that was spread out by that ERCOT organization that you were talking about. As a result, it just shows that fossil fuel is necessary.
That was Texas Governor Greg Abbott explaining the terrible situation that is still unfolding down in Texas. Many people are scratching their heads at how such an energy-rich state could find itself in a situation where Millions are now without power. Dozens are dead from a brutal winter storm, incredibly low temperatures there. The left is, of course, attacking Texas as a result of this on a policy level. It's a Republican state, and they say that the energy issues and blackouts in places like California, of course, are to be ignored. But in Texas, it's all the fault of the GOP. To give us a better idea of what's actually happening on the ground in the Lone Star State, we're happy to welcome my friend and host, Stu Does America, Stu Burguiere, whose house is currently flooded, and he's down in Texas right now. Stu, seems you are safe and dry and reasonably warm, so God bless. We're happy to see that. How's it going down there?
Well, in this particular room, I am safe and dry, Buck. Yeah, it's been a bit of disaster, really. I mean, we woke up in the middle of the late morning to an alarm going out throughout the house, only to find water pouring through our ceilings and flooding about 2/3 of the house. About 6 inches of water wiped out pretty much everything on that side of the house, which was not fun at all. I like an idiot was bailing water out of doors and trying to play hero, only to find out that this is going to be the next 6 months of our lives are going to be terrible. I keep coming back to the idea, though, at least it is warm. We still have electricity, which is much more than most people can say around our area. So, you take the blessings where you can find them. But I'm pretty pissed off at the moment.
So what happened here? I mean, for outsiders, you think of Texas and you think of all the energy that the rest of the country relies on. A lot of it, right, is produced in and comes from Texas. It really is America's energy superpower as a state. So we hear that people don't have heat or electricity. There's blackouts. Is this just a function of what is truly unforeseeable weather, Stu, or is there real blame to go around here for the folks that are in charge of what I believe is the only electric grid that is not under any federal regulation? It's actually just the state of Texas in charge.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things going on. I mean, first of all, I'm from the Northeast. We used to be up in New York working together. And when you see on the news, there's been 2 to 4 inches of snow that fell in Texas, it just seems like Texans are a bunch of wusses and can't drive, which is that's how I would feel, I think, if I was in the Northeast. However, you realize when you're down here for a while, they're completely unprepared for this. It's like if there was a mild earthquake that hits San Francisco, nothing happens. But if it hits an area that doesn't get earthquakes, a lot happens. And so there's just like no plows. There's no trucks. There's barely any sanding going on. I mean, it feels like you're basically out on your own. And when something like this happens, and it's happened probably 2 or 3 times in the last decade, the whole state just shuts down because it's hard to justify having a massive fleet of plows for an event that happens every 5 years. So basically, we're all kind of just sitting here waiting for it to get warm this weekend so this stuff will melt and we can go on with our lives. And then I think in addition to that, you have the added pressure of there's a federal situation going on where they're constantly subsidizing green energy. And so we are the nation's leader and one of the world's leaders in wind power. People don't think of Texas, they think of fossil fuels, but we, lead one of the world leaders in wind power. And, those things are freezing up. We're having that sort of baseboard power that can kind of constantly generate nuclear and fossil fuels. That is a big part of our equation, but increasingly it's wind power. And wind power is just, not reliable. It's expensive. It's unreliable. The only reason people really go through with it down here is because it gets so heavily subsidized that it gets incentivized to be used more often. But at the end of the day, when you get to a situation like this, when you really need it, it's not a reliable source of energy. I think everybody knows that. But we are just, it's an expensive price to pay to signal your green virtue here. And people are paying with their lives down here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know that there have been lives lost, and we've seen these videos of people sleeping in their cars, which clearly there's the concern about carbon monoxide for anybody who stays indoors too long in their garage because they're trying to not freeze to death. Understandable why they're trying to use the heat in their cars. What kind of measures are being taken by the authorities? Are we seeing National Guard stepping up? What is being done to address this, and what should be done? Because you said you guys are hoping in the weekend it might be 60, 70 degrees. That's a couple of days away, and I was seeing sub-zero degrees for people that not only don't have the electricity turned on, don't have the heat to deal with this either.
Yeah, it's really bad. I mean, they're doing what they can, I think, at a central level where you're getting a lot of these large heating zones. You can go to like a central area where they have the heat on. If you're in an emergency, if there's an elderly person who can't get to heat, they're offering transportation to get to these centralized zones. Of course, no one wants to go to them. I mean, unless it's an absolute last gasp. That stuff's going on. I know they're trying to get the power turned on to all these areas, but now they're worried about when they turn it on, what's going to happen. Everyone's going to turn on their energy at full blast as soon as they can to get the heat back on and get everything generated, and that's going to cause another massive problem. So right now, I think they really don't know what to do. The water is another big issue. Our situation was a water pipe burst in our second floor. This is happening all over the place. There's a church down the street they came in, opened up the door, water started pouring out of the sanctuary. It's happening all over the place. And they worry because when it does thaw, that's when a lot of these pipes, you're going to reveal that they have already burst. They don't even know it yet because everything's frozen. So we're in for weeks and weeks and weeks of just assessing what the problem is before it really can come up with a long-term solution.
I do have to ask what you think in response to your fellow Texan, for better or for worse, Beto O'Rourke. Here's what he said.
So much of this was avoidable. Going back to the deregulation of our electricity grid here in Texas, which has created an incentive to actually not weatherize or protect against these events so that some of your plants can be shut down and you can profit from the spiking prices for energy and electricity.
Also, AOC, if you want a real expert on how to keep a power grid going, the infrastructure failures in Texas are quite literally what happens when you don't pursue a Green New Deal. What do you make, Stu?
Shockingly, all of this is just backing up what everyone thought beforehand, which happens at every one of these crises. Look, Beto O'Rourke, first of all, not a Texan. I've been here for 10 years. He's been here much longer, but he is not a Texan. You're much more a Texan, Buck, than Beto O'Rourke will ever be. Look, there is an issue here where you talk about whether it's incentivizing weatherization. We know what happens when there's a massively regulated state. We look at California, right? They deal with this every seemingly 2 or 3 months when they're having these rolling blackouts. Turning the United States into California is not the answer. This is a very strange weather phenomenon. I always come back to this. Like, when you want government to do something, the thing you need to be able to accept is massive inefficiency. And at some level, something like this, a once-in-a-decade type of weather event, is the type of thing that you can have some government assistance in, and that we should be prepared to make sure that people can be safe and transported to areas that are warm. Weatherizing does make sense in some of these situations, but turning the world into AOC's fever dream, I assure you, is not going to help the situation. It's going to turn us into California and make things much, much worse.
Stu Burguiere, everybody. Stu, seriously, stay warm, stay safe. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
Principal of a New York City school under the microscope after sending parents materials imploring them to become white traitors and push to become white abolitionists. Is this the direction of public education in more than just one place? We'll talk about this with Matt Walsh when we come back. A woke New York City public school is asking students and parents to reflect on their whiteness. You heard that right. The principal of Eastside Community High School sent the school's parents a pamphlet asking them to rate their whiteness using this graph you see on the screen. Titled The 8 White Identities, it includes a colored meter ranging from white supremacist to white abolitionist. The further green you get, the better person you are. The curriculum was written by an associate professor of African American Studies at Northwestern University, who claims there is a regime of whiteness and there are action-oriented white identities. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. Our next guest says that this is racial discrimination and that urging parents to be white traitors calls for legal action against the schools. We got Matt Walsh with us now, host of the Matt Walsh Show. Mr. Walsh, good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Buck.
So what are your first thoughts when you see that now parents are being told to consider whether they simply have white privilege, engage in white voyeurism, or are straight up white supremacists and don't even know it?
Yeah, it's explicit, in your face racism. If this doesn't qualify as racism, then the word simply has no meaning whatsoever anymore. And all you have to do, I think any rational person sees that it's racism. Only unfortunately, there's a dwindling supply of rational people out there. But if you have trouble seeing it, then just imagine, take white out of, you look at that dial with all the different colors and take white out of it and put any other race there. And how would it look to you? It would look racist because it is. And that's why we got to get to a point where lawsuits are being filed. This is racial discrimination. It's race-based harassment. It happens in the schools. It happens in the workplace, where you're singling out a certain race of people, and which you can't do that, period. But not only are you singling out a race of people, but you're telling them about themselves. You're putting all of these negative labels on them, and it's someone's got to step up to the plate and file the lawsuit. That's what has to happen.
What do you think the left is hoping to achieve by mandating what is essentially critical race theory or intersectionality, the different ways of describing this same kind of identity politics indoctrination? What do you think, Matt, the left believes they can achieve or are achieving by not only brainwashing kids with this stuff, but also their parents now, as we see, are trying to, and in federal institutions and in government buildings now, this is becoming more commonplace? What's the point?
It's all part of course, their social engineering leading up to their Marxist utopia they hope to build. And you start in the schools. You start at very young ages. This might be something they were sending to the parents, but think about what they're telling the kids in that school, if this is what they're saying to the parents. And so you start at the youngest ages possible. You start in elementary school with critical race theory. And that's when kids are, they have no psychological defense at all. They're completely vulnerable. They can't sift out and differentiate between propaganda and truth. They have no, most adults can't even do that. Kids are helpless. And so that's, you start there. And what ends up happening, I think the real trend here is it's about instilling self-loathing into people, especially kids. And not just race-based. I mean, it's racial. So, if you're white, you have to hate your whiteness, reject your whiteness. But also, if you're a boy, you have to hate and reject your masculinity. If you're a girl, then you should reject, and you find traditional femininity appealing. Maybe you're more excited about being a mother and a wife than a businesswoman. Well, no, that's bad. You have to reject that. Hate your country. All of your ancestors that came before you, they're all a bunch of bigots. You should hate them too. So that's what it is. It's instilling this real self-loathing into the population. And then we wonder why kids are depressed and killing themselves and on drugs. I mean, this has a lot to do with it.
And since this is an academic framework that they're setting up here, in this case, we're talking about a school putting this forward for parents, but we know this happens in universities. In fact, it really started in universities, stretching back for decades. How do they really define whiteness? I think people just skip past this in the discussion. But I've met blonde-haired, blue-eyed Kurds in Iraq. I've talked to red-haired, very fair-skinned Palestinians in my day. I've been to Afghanistan where there are blue-eyed, blonde-haired people that are supposedly the descendants of Alexander the Great. I mean, what qualifies as whiteness? Are we really just talking, what do they mean when they say, they give us this chart, what falls under whiteness?
Well, that's a good question. I wish I could answer. I think part of the point is that there is no precise answer to that. I think probably the answer is whiteness can be whatever they want it to be. It's if you are a black person who's conservative, then they would probably say that you're even if you're not white, you're participating in whiteness or whatever. The ambiguity is the point. It's the same thing with sex. The question I'm always asking to the left is, well, what do you think a woman is? How do you define the term woman? If you think that a man can be pregnant and menstruate, and they never answer the question. That's because, again, the ambiguity is the point. Woman is whatever they say, whatever they need it to be in the moment is what it is. And I think it's probably the same with whiteness.
I know we're talking a bit about here intersectionality and whiteness training and all this sort of stuff in schools, or whiteness awareness training in schools. But I did want to get your reaction before we let you go to Vice President Harris on the Today Show talking about their school guidance, their school reopening guidance. Here's what she said.
Was it a mistake for the CDC to connect school reopening to how much infection there is in a community?
Well, let's first say this, that in the last 4 weeks, schools are opening every week. More schools are opening. They want to go back to school. We want them to go back to school. Teachers want to teach.
But what about that CDC guidance then? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, they just keep talking in circles, right? Whether it's Biden or Harris or you name it, it's clearly safe for children to be in schools because children have been in schools for the whole year and it has been fine. But public school teachers don't want to go back. Why can't we? Are we ever going to get a straight answer?
No, I don't think. I guess this goes back to the ambiguity is the point. It's yet again is another example of that where, everybody. When you talk to anyone in the Biden administration, even the teachers and the teachers union, it's everyone seems to agree. Sure, we want schools to open. Yeah, we really want schools to open. We do. But as far as when are they going to open, what is the plan to get them open? Here is a specific plan. Will you support this specific plan that we've drawn up? That's where you can't get them nailed down because we know at least with the teachers union, they're perfectly happy to stay closed forever because they don't give a damn about the kids or about education. And we know that the Democrat Party is completely beholden to the teachers union, so they're not going to say anything to the teachers union to upset them. But as you said, we know that the kids are fine. There's no reason to have schools closed. And the comparison with the flu really does apply here because the CDC itself says the flu is more dangerous for kids than COVID is. Kids are at a higher risk of having serious complications from the flu than they are from COVID. And we never had anything like this with the flu. Never, none of this. And so I think that right there, that alone tells you everything you need to know.
Matt Walsh, everybody. Matt, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Coming up, COVID statistics, and Jen Psaki once again demonstrates where her priority. Some Biden peeps can't answer basic questions about COVID statistics, and Jen Psaki once again demonstrates where her priorities are. Those stories in quick hits. Let's get to it. Andy Slavitt. Oh my. Of all the COVID catastrophists out there, the people that have been saying the worst possible outcomes are going to happen, and you have to listen to us the most or else even more terrible stuff. Slavitt's at the very top of that list. He's been wrong and wrong and wrong again. But I thought this was fascinating. Posed with presented with the very straightforward question. Why is it that you have California, you have Florida? One had a lockdown, California. The other one, Florida, did not. Why does Florida not only have close to the results of California, but better results than California on COVID without any lockdown? Here's what happened. Play it.
With what we just saw. Contrast states like Florida and California. California basically in lockdown, and their numbers aren't that different from Florida.
Well, good morning, Stephanie. Look, there's so much of this virus that we think we understand, that we think we can predict, that's just a little bit beyond our explanation. What we do know is that the more careful people are, the more they mask and social distance, and the quicker we vaccinate, the quicker it goes away and the less it spreads.
There we go. I got no answer for you, he says, except we know what we're telling you is right, so just do more of the stuff that we're telling you to do. That's all. Was the stuff all right when you look at the numbers? California, Florida? Be quiet, do what we tell you. That's the answer from Slav. That's the answer from all these Fauciites, as I call them. Dr. Fauci. Just telling you to just be quiet and listen. Don't get all uppity thinking that you're allowed to have any say in policies that are ruining your business, taking away your freedom, not allowing you to breathe normally. Don't think you're allowed to weigh in on that. You be quiet and let the experts tell you what to do because they've been so right and so smart. I know. I want to punch myself in the face just for saying it. Here's, speaking of punching people, Governor Cuomo threatened a Democrat, New York Assemblyman Ron Kim, told CNN that Governor Cuomo called last Thursday to, quote, threaten my career if I did not cover up for Melissa DeRosa and what she said. Cuomo also said I hadn't seen his wrath and that he can destroy me, according to Kim. Now, let me tell you, it is it's not even an open secret, openly known by anybody who has any familiarity with New York State politics, that Andrew Cuomo is a vicious maniac, a bad guy who is vindictive, who is nasty, I've heard this from plenty of people. In fact, I actually worked with a guy years ago who had worked with Eliot Spitzer, who was a real piece of work. And he said that even Spitzer and his people would be like, Well, I mean, Cuomo's really nasty. That guy's really mean. Give you a sense of what we're dealing with here. But shouldn't there be even greater outrage about this? Cuomo's clearly in scorched earth damage control over the nursing home disaster because he can't hide from it anymore. So what is he doing? He's running around telling everybody, do what I say or else. Cover up or else I'll ruin you. What happened when the White House reporter, or White House rather, a deputy press secretary, we remember he was being mean to a reporter. They fired him from his job, or he resigned from his job. But I'll destroy you when you're the governor of New York. You get to say that, not even to a reporter, you get to say that to fellow politicians. As long as you're a Democrat and you're important enough to the party, no consequences whatsoever. So I stand with Assemblyman Ron Kim on this one, Democrat, willing to speak truth to not just power, his own party's power. And we need a whole lot more of that. I mentioned the White House press secretary, deputy, formerly now, because he got into a problem there. But you also have Jen Psaki, a.k.a. Psaki Bomb. Here's one that she dropped.
What is President Biden doing for my small business? First and foremost, he nominated a woman to lead the Small Business Administration who formerly worked there.
Yeah. He hired a woman for the Small Business Administration. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I mean, see, I'm fair, unlike the Lib. She did go on to say more things. But it was interesting that the first place her mind went was that she, first and foremost, he nominated a woman to lead the Small Business Administration. When somebody writes in, what is President Biden doing for my small business? Well, obviously the optics of who he puts in charge of other things really matters to your small business. I think not at all, but there you have it. You know, the journos are some of the biggest, that's the term in case you haven't picked up that I like to use for journalists. It's just contemptuous and degrading enough that they really deserve it, right? The journos. The New York Times is, of course, a nest of journos. And they should be advocates for free speech. You go back to the Pentagon Papers, you go back to the First Amendment and the way that journalists fought for it in the decades past. Well, it's been receding, obviously, in recent years, especially under the Trump administration. Now journos seem to live with the constant fear that someone, somewhere, is having an unmonitored, unwoke conversation. Here you go, New York Times, unfettered conversations, that's right, unfettered, oh good heavens, are taking place on Clubhouse, an invitation-only app that lets people gather in audio chat rooms. The platform has exploded in popularity despite grappling with concerns over harassment, misinformation, and privacy. They're saying, hey, hold on a second. If people are in this live chat app, how do we censor them? How do we eliminate their wrongthink in real time like they do on Twitter and Facebook and Google? Oh no, what will we ever do? People allowed to exchange ideas freely with other human beings in America? What is this place? Yeah, that's the New York Times for you. And that's it for Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly. Up next, Shields High.